Hey everybody, and welcome to the show. Oh shit, there we go. That's a great way to start the show. Hey, welcome. Got a great show for you guys today. We'll be talking about some very interesting stuff, including the NFL. Actually, that's the headline story here. We'll be talking about the NFL's decision to stop players from kneeling during the anthem. Great. Awesome. That's just what we needed, right? Anyway, so I'll get into that. We have an update on Aaron Schlossberg. That is, of course, a racist lawyer that got caught being racist. Fairly simple story on that, but nonetheless, update. A story from a little bit early in the week that I didn't get to about a secret Donald Trump Jr. meeting. We also have an update on the Michael Cohen situation, what's going on there. Big news yesterday. Then we have the Democrats doing what Democrats do best, folding to Republicans and actually helping them destroy financial regulations. Wonderful. I got the details on that. I also have a wall of shame for Democrats who did support this. And then finally, an energy company busted paying protesters. I love the paid protester story. It's great. Anyway, so it's going to be a good show. If you guys, well, okay, let's start that again. If you could, please like and share the stream. So that really helps out. So if you could do that for me, I would definitely appreciate it. That is one of the big ways to help the show, is to, of course, spread the word. Another way to help the show and to, of course, make sure that I get your feedback is through the YouTube Super Chat. So, again, great way to help the show. I will read off Super Chats later on during the show, see if you have something to say or if you want to suggest a story or a topic, anything like that. Please use the YouTube Super Chat. Okay. And finally, the other way to help the show is to visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/TYTNation. So that helps out quite a bit as well. All right. Anyway, it's an interesting day today. There's been a lot actually happening, including Jared Kushner getting security clearance. Yeah, I'm not kidding. So that's a news story. I just saw that. Trending. We got Tommy Lahren trending, which is interesting. Apparently somebody threw water at her, and I think the big story is that she didn't melt. Just saying. And don't throw water at Tommy Lahren, even though she deserves it. Still probably not a good idea to do it, because, see, every time somebody does something like that, it allows her to go back and say, oh my God, what a victim. I'm such a victim. So that's generally, I just, it's not that I wouldn't want to throw something at Tommy Lahren. It's just the fact that I don't want her to be able to use that as ammunition to boost her case, to prove her case, and to prove, oh my God, I'm such a victim. These liberals are so mean to me. But wait a minute. Tommy Lahren, you're the one who says all these terrible, racist, horrific things. You're not the victim, you're the bully. But in that case, of course, if you do anything remotely bad to her, if you say anything remotely bad, she's still going to come back and claim that, oh my God, she's a victim. But anyway, so that's fun. Tommy Lahren, still despicable as ever. But anyway, and it's hilarious that not even that even Donald Trump gets involved. But yeah, don't throw drinks at her. I would actually, interestingly enough, I would try to strike up a conversation, because I still have the belief that she does not believe in anything that she talks about. That I think that she basically is like, yeah, she's a terrible person, but not because of the things that she says. She's a terrible person because she says those things, doesn't believe them, and only does it for the money. That's my belief of Tommy Lahren. Because, look, if you have seen any of the stuff, like the tweets before she got the job at I think it was The Blaze. Either she started on The Blaze or One America News Network. I'm not sure which one. I know she was on The Blaze until she started talking about how she's actually okay with abortion. Interesting. You look at her tweets, she's talking about popping the pee. Definitely not your wholesome conservative, right? So I really doubt that she believes anything that she says. I would be very, very surprised. And, of course, like a lot of people on the right, it's all about the money. I'm just here to get paid, man. That's it. Oh, you want me to say these terrible things? Sure. And look, Tomi Lahren, she's like the perfect spokeswoman for Fox. Blonde. And is more than happy to compromise her ideals in order to go and say terrible things for money. Hey, man, got to pay that college tuition. Because, yes, we do know that she actually went to college. Because there's video of her talking about how climate change is real and we have to do something about it for a college show. So we know she's got that education. We know she's got them student loans. Got to pay them off with that Fox money. But anyway, that's fun. But let's get into the stories today. A lot of stuff to talk about. So we'll start out with a big story of the day. The National Football League. You know, that would have been a good sidebar, National Football League. God, why didn't I think of that before? Anyway. Now, the NFL has decided that it will issue new rules designed to crack down on protests during the national anthem. Now, according to the New York Times, these rules were voted on in order to stop the backlash against the NFL for protests by the players. Of course, these protests were started by Colin Kaepernick, who decided to have a silent protest where he would kneel during the national anthem. So, look, before anybody paid attention to it, it wasn't a huge story. And then conservative pundits that are completely butthurt, you know, they were like, oh my God, how dare you? How dare you kneel during the flag? You were disrespecting the troops. But that doesn't have anything to do with that. Well, nonetheless, that backlash, to which even the President of the United States got involved, has led to the NFL saying, well, we got to do something. We got to do something. Okay. Now, Commissioner Roger Goodell said that that owners voted unanimously to find teams that their players are on the field or sidelines, but do not show respect for the flag and the anthem. Basically, you must, under all circumstances, worship the flag if you're on the field, or else your team will be fined and you'll even get 15-yard penalties. Oh. Did I mention how the flag was supposed to stand for freedom and democracy? Not a whole lot to do with freedom right there, this decision. Now, he continued by saying, it was unfortunate that on-field protests created a false perception among many that thousands of NFL players were unpatriotic. This is not and was never the case. All right, so, yes, were there people who actually thought that, oh my God, this is an affront to the flag? Yeah. And you know who, again, blew this up nationally? The President of the United States, Donald Trump. He's like, oh, how dare you? You should fire people who don't stand for the flag. And he probably got that from a Fox News segment. So, look, now the problem with this, and there are many, one, you're blaming the protesters. What are you doing? Like, these people are on the field. They have a right to not salute the flag or not stand during the flag. They have a right to kneel. Or at least you think they should have the right to kneel, right? And the other thing about it, as I said before, it's not the protesters that put out the idea that kneeling was unpatriotic. These have nothing to do with the flag. Actually, it has nothing to do with the troops. Absolutely nothing to do with the troops. In fact, this is about protests against police brutality and for racial and social justice. And more specifically, if you get into it, it's more about how we're not actually, as a society, holding up to the values that that flag is supposed to represent. It's not disrespect against the flag. It's the fact that we as a country, we're not living up to the ideals. We're not living up to the idea of liberty and justice for all. I mean, how can you stand for that flag knowing that we don't have liberty and justice for all? That there are hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people unjustly incarcerated in our system that are getting arrested for nonviolent crimes. We do not have liberty and justice for all. We don't treat everybody equally in this country. And a lot of it is based on the color of your skin. So we're the ones as a country who are failing to live up to what the flag is supposed to represent. You can't stand for that and not be a hypocrite knowing all this stuff. Okay. Now, of course, conservatives who are snowflakes cry and whine, and they completely mischaracterize what was before a silent protest. Now, Kaepernick didn't make it about patriotism, as I said before. Donald Trump, however, along with butthurt conservative pundits, they're the ones who made this about the military. It's the one who made it about patriotism. And again, it didn't have anything to do with either of those things. Now, speaking of democracy, right? Freedom and democracy, right? Well, this decision was not made through democratic means, at least in the workplace. The new policy had been adopted at the league's spring meeting in Atlanta without any involvement from the players' union. So the union actually is supposed to represent the players and have some sort of workplace democracy. That's the whole point of a union. The union wasn't even involved. No, we don't care about what our players think. All they are is a commodity for us to make money. Well, you think we give a shit about the players? No, of course not. No, we're going to go with the owners. Why? Because the owners are... Look, why the owners made this decision, most of the owners are wealthy white conservatives. That's pretty much it. And what they're doing is that they're basically appealing to their racist fans, which include the President of the United States, who is an old school racist. Now, it's funny, is I saw something from, I believe it was Vox, that actually showed that the fans, a lot of the people that watch the NFL, are actually a very inclusive group. So it's not just like white conservatives that watch the NFL. There's a lot of people. Well, I'm guessing after this decision, that's probably going to change. There's a lot of people out there that are saying, look, I'm not going to support the NFL. I'm not going to support their organization now, because you're essentially forcing patriotism on these players. Whether or not you agree with their protest or not, should they have the ability to protest? I think that they should. Nonetheless, the NFL is a private company. However, this is a private company that's getting public dollars. And I'm going to go into that for a minute here. Because, look, if you go back a few years, even to 2015, they had been getting money from the Department of Defense. And so, look, they got that money in order to try to promote more patriotism, to get more people to join up into the military so they can go off to fight wars. The Defense Department, according to Think Progress, spent at least $10.4 million on marketing and advertising contracts with professional sports teams across the board between 2012 and 2015. So this is public taxpayer money given to these teams in the NFL to be patriotic, to inspire patriotism. Prior to that, teams were not giving any specific instructions on the matter. Some chose to remain in the locker room until after opening ceremonies were completed. Now, in 2009, this is when they began trying to pressure teams to be more patriotic. But before that, they weren't. They didn't have to be. It's not that they weren't patriotic, but they didn't do these demonstrations. They didn't do all this crazy flag waving, right? So that is until the Department of Defense waved a bunch of money in their face and said, hey, we need you to be more patriotic, to inspire more people to go into the military, et cetera, et cetera. So now we're going to do this. Look, it's about the money, okay? And that's what it's always been about. Goodell and the rest of these owners, all they care about is their, that money from the Department of Defense, that money from advertisers who try to stay away from things that are controversial. And what's controversial about this? Pretty much everything according to advertisers, right? Now, I don't. It's a crazy decision, you know. This is, again, enforced patriotism out in the field. And I know some people want to make it a First Amendment issue. It isn't necessarily a First Amendment issue. I don't know how that public money kind of factors into that. You would think that if public money from the government went into these teams, then that would make it possibly a First Amendment issue if the team decides to crack down. But again, I'm not entirely sure on that. But normally, if there isn't, I guess, public money or public investment involved, these are private corporations. They can do whatever the hell they want, make whatever terrible rules they want, but it doesn't make it right. So on the ideology of this, I absolutely 100% agree with the protesters, agree with Kaepernick, and I think this is a terrible, terrible decision. And me personally, if I were if I were somebody who actually was in the NFL, yeah, that'd be a crazy day, but I would actually boycott. I would, as a player, as an African American player, if I were in their shoes, I would boycott immediately. Okay, hey, you don't want to respect, and whether or not I agree with the protest, that's the fact that they made this decision without consulting the players, without going to the players' union. I'd be like, well, you obviously don't care about my right to protest. You don't care about me at all, so why am I going to play in your game? If that happens, imagine all these players that are not going to play. It would be fascinating. And it might actually change their minds real quick. Can't have a football game if nobody decides they want to play. But anyway, one more thing. Look, if you are one of those people who are so angry when somebody makes a protest, a silent protest, when an African American decides they want to protest in whatever way, and they're protesting against racism or people getting shot, and well, then you're a snowflake. And at the end of the day, you don't understand anything. You don't understand at all what they're fighting against or what they're fighting for. Okay. All right. So let's move on here. Now, Aaron Schlossberg wants you to know that he's sorry. Really, really sorry. And that he is totally not a racist. In a statement posted by his law firm's Twitter account, the lawyer was caught in viral video where he threatened to report 2 women to ICE for speaking Spanish. Very classy. Schlossberg wrote that he was sorry for his actions in that video. He writes, "Seeing myself online opened my eyes. The manner in which I express myself is unacceptable and is not the person I am." That is totally not the person that I am. Okay, well, really. I have a hard time buying that because how do you explain the half a dozen videos of you doing the same thing in different places at different times? Randomly bumping into people in New York on the streets and calling them dirty foreigners. Nah, bro. Ain't buying it. Ain't buying it at all. Nonetheless, he continues, "One of the reasons I moved to New York is precisely because of the remarkable diversity offered in this wonderful city. I love this country and this city, in part because of immigrants and the diversity of cultures immigrants bring to this country. Man, does that sound like a load of shit. Let me tell you what I think this is about. He got caught, and he regrets getting caught. He doesn't regret actually being racist towards those people and say, oh, I pay for your welfare. No, you don't. How do you even know those people are on welfare? Well, it's because you believe that everybody who is, first of all, everybody who speaks Spanish, which is weird because you speak Spanish, Aaron. Everybody who speaks Spanish is an undocumented immigrant and lives off your welfare, which is it's not even true because people who are undocumented federally don't get any sort of welfare programs. And look, it varies by state to state that in certain states you can get some sort of benefits. But again, it varies by state to state, right? Now, no, this is all about getting caught, right? And let me tell you, the backlash towards him has been huge. Last Friday, for example, there was a crowd of protesters that actually did a fundraiser and raised enough money to hire a mariachi band and park a taco truck next to Aaron Schlossberg's apartment. You held a taco party. Ain't no party like a taco party. Hell yeah. Except Schlossberg was not having fun at all. Look, not only that, but of course, Schlossberg has become one of the most hated people on the internet. Kicked out of his office in New York City. And of course, his law firm has seen thousands of comments and downvotes on Yelp. So, look, man, he's definitely been getting a lot of backlash, and this is his way of, I think, trying to end that and maybe to salvage his reputation. And that's what this is. And look, I'm not buying it. Now, I'm not saying that we should keep harassing him, right? However, I do think that if he really doesn't want to be known as a racist, if he actually truly is sorry, well, then maybe he should actually do something. Again, talk is cheap, right? One Twitter user, for example, named Eric Schmetzer, had a fantastic idea how he could work to start redeeming himself. He suggested on Twitter that he should go work pro bono for Latino immigrants in cases versus ICE, or give to organizations that help Latino immigrants. I mean, look, there are dreamers out there, right? People who work, people who go to school, pay taxes, but are still not citizens because they were brought in by their parents, that face deportation. Well, if you're serious about this, then maybe you should go and use your resources to help them. It's not like you can't talk to them. You know Spanish. You're very fluent in Spanish. And you have a law firm. Well, that would go very, very well. That would help your law firm a lot. Because it's good PR and it's the right thing to do. And not only that, but if you go and work with these people, maybe you'll actually learn something. Maybe you'll actually get some empathy. Now, I don't think that's very likely. I think that he is definitely a racist, despite claiming that he's not. And the reason I think that is because he's been caught too many times in public doing this to have a sudden convenient change of heart when things get tough. Then again, there are ways that you can prove us wrong, so go ahead and do them. Okay. Moving on. Now, earlier this week, the New York Times published a new report dealing with the Trump Tower meeting between Donald Trump Jr. And the Russian lawyer who promised to have dirt on Hillary Clinton, to share this dirt on Hillary Clinton. Now, that's the meeting, of course, where he said, oh, I love it. especially in the summer. Meaning, of course, the dirt on Hillary Clinton. Now, we don't know if we actually got anything from that meeting, but if it's true, it would be a campaign finance violation, obviously, because that is wildly illegal, taking money from foreign sources or taking anything that's worth money from a foreign source. Now, we know about that part. I've talked about that part before. Now, what's new is that Donald Trump Jr. apparently had a separate, previously unreported meeting. Now, this meeting was with an Israeli social media specialist, an emissary for 2 Arab princes. Oh, that's fun. And a private military contractor who offered potentially illegal data services to the Trump campaign. Now, that contractor, you're going to be familiar with the name. It is Eric Prince, former head of Blackwater. Now, the New York Times writes that Prince had arranged a meeting which took place on August 3rd of 2016. Now, Eric Prince is also the brother of Betsy DeVos. So that kind of explains how they might have actually gotten something in return. We don't know if there was information or data services used on behalf of Donald Trump, but we do know that somehow Betsy DeVos, Eric Prince's brother, ended up in the administration as education secretary. Or maybe she just bought her seat. That's the other explanation for that. But nonetheless, the emissary, George Nader, told Donald Trump Jr. that the princes who led Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates were both eager to help his father win election as president. And of course, if they help Trump, well, then Trump helps them, right? Now, in Saudi Arabia, of course, we're sending them weapons. We're helping them with the massacre of the Houthis in Yemen. As far as the United Arab Emirates, of course, we're also doing deals with the UAE. And we're helping them against the nation of Qatar. So that's funny because I think it was Kushner that tried to get money from Qatar, was unable to secure financing for one of his buildings, and then it urged Trump to help the Saudi blockade of Qatar. So there seems to be a lot of, I guess, deals going on between those Middle Eastern nations, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. And of course, the Trumps are massively on the side of those countries. Very interesting. And now we find out that Donald Trump Jr. had meetings with an emissary from both of those countries. Fascinating. Very fascinating. Now, it's also hilarious when you think about it because here's Trump Jr. meeting with Muslims that are offering to help with the Trump campaign, which was very anti-Muslim. So, look, in reality, he talks and says all these terrible things about Muslims. Why? It's because it riles up his base. And his base is like, oh my God, there's somebody that hates Muslims just as much as I do. But behind the scenes, here's Donald Trump Jr. saying, oh, Muslims? Absolutely, I'll meet with Muslims. They're going to help my dad. And of course, you also had Trump himself saying things like, oh, Saudis, I love the Saudis. Especially when they come and buy when they rent my multi-million-dollar apartments. So, in reality, look, Donald Trump loves Muslims, especially when they give him money. Do you feel like you're winning yet, though? But look, anyway. Now, finally, Trump Jr. also met with Joel Zammel. Now, Joel Zammel is a social media expert. Now, he said that his company could help the Trump campaign. Now, how would they do that? Well, it turns out, as I said, they do a lot of social media, and they had a proposal ready. By the time of this meeting, there was a multi-million-dollar proposal for a social media manipulation effort in order to help Donald Trump win the election. Now, does that sound familiar? I wonder. Now, the company also employed several Israeli former intelligence officers that were specialized in collecting information and shaping opinion through social media. Again, a lot like what the Russians are alleged to have done. and I actually believe they had done. Now, look, as far as social media manipulation, is that important? Yes and no, right? Look, the Russians, did they use bots and memes, right? Yes. Did it have an impact on an election? Maybe, right? Now, that said, okay, if we find out that's true, I mean, it's true with the Russians, and, oh my God, memes. So are we going to go after a sitting president for memes? No, the real problem here is money laundering. Did they get, in this case, did Donald Trump Jr., was part of the Trump organization, part of the Trump campaign, did he get money, and did the Trump organization itself get money from either of these people that he had meetings with and did not disclose it? Well, again, these are, look, this is an emissary for two foreign princes. And then you also have an Israeli firm that did social media manipulation, right? Did they give the campaign money? What did they promise the campaign? And what did they get in return? I've been saying before, the real problem is not collusion, right? No, the real problem here is corruption. The real problem here is money laundering. And I would be shocked if Donald Trump had not committed some sort of financial crime. Now, anyway, according to the Times, Trump Jr. responded approvingly, and after those initial offers of help, Mr. Nader was quickly embraced as a close ally by Trump campaign advisors, meeting frequently with Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, and Michael Flynn, who became the president's first national security advisor. Later, Nader previously allegedly paid Zamel as much as $2 million. Now, as I said before, it is illegal for any foreign person or government to provide any sort of assistance to a political campaign. That said, I don't think you're going to be able to remove a sitting president for just that. Look, let me give you an example of why. Donald Trump, how many times has Donald Trump broken the emoluments clause? Nobody cares. Nobody cares about that stuff, unfortunately. And the Democrats, they painted themselves into a bit of a corner by talking about, oh my God, collusion, right? We're going to be able to remove him, collusion, impeach him. That's not going to happen. I know, like, sorry, liberals, not going to happen. That's not the real problem. The problem is the money laundering. That's the big problem, okay? And look, as far as impeachment goes, that's also a bit of a pipe dream. That would involve having Republicans turn on the president, and I don't think that's going to happen. At least not as long as Donald Trump's approval ratings continue to remain incredibly high with Republican voters. Now, look, if that changes, if Republican politicians see that supporting Trump ends up hurting their election chances, well, then they're dumping like a hot potato. But that's got to happen first. And I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that he's going to be removed for if they find any collusion, so what? Any of these crimes, right? Financial or whatever. It's not enough to remove a sitting president. So this pipe dream of impeaching him and eliminating Trump, it's not very, very likely not going to happen. And look, if he is found for collusion and if he has done all these financial crimes, for example, laundered money for the Russians and then worked together with the Russians, do you think the Republicans are going to turn on him? No. They're not going to care enough to turn on Trump. We're going to have to find out that if Republicans actually do care enough about democracy to end up doing something. Or are they okay with fascism? I don't think so. I don't think we're going to have a Republican Party that cares enough to do that, and Donald Trump will continue to be in power. And also, look, if that happens, we're going to have a constitutional crisis on our hands. So we're going to have to see what happens here with Donald Trump and the Republicans, and, of course, all this different information coming out, and whether or not there's collusion or any sort of financial crimes. But it is interesting to see the role that Donald Jr. is playing in another bombshell report where it shows that, yes, he is more than willing to get together and to collude with other foreign countries and foreign nations and companies and things in order to try and win the election. So, okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a quick break here. We'll come back. We got more stories. We got Michael Cohen. Then we have the Democrats resisting, but not really. So stay right here. Oops. Stay right here, and we'll be right back. Around the Nation. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Run the Nation right here, TOT Nation. Please give us a like and a share if you haven't already. Also, ways to help the show, Super Chat. YouTube Super Chat. So that helps us out greatly. Okay. Anyway. Let's move on. We got Michael Cohen. Some interesting news about that. Let's get into it. Bad news for Michael Cohen and, by extension, President Trump. New York Times is reporting that one of Cohen's business partners has just agreed to cooperate with the government as a witness in the case against his former partner, Michael Cohen. Under the deal reached with the New York Attorney General's office, the partner, Evgeny A. Friedman, who is a Russian immigrant known as the Taxi King, has agreed to assist government prosecutors in state or federal investigations, according to a person briefed on the matter. Now, they say that the broadened scope of Mr. Friedman's cooperation may prove worrisome not only to Mr. Cohen, who is the target of a continuing federal investigation, but also Mr. Trump. So I'm going to get into that because this is a pretty significant revelation, right? So this is actually going to obviously lead to more pressure on Mr. Cohen. Now, let me get into some details about what Mr. Friedman had allegedly done. According to the Times, Mr. Friedman has been Mr. Cohen's partner in the taxi business for years. Now, he managed cabs for him after New York City regulators barred Mr. Friedman from continuing to manage medallions. So that, of course, you have to have a taxi medallion in order to run a taxi service. So that, of course, can get very, very expensive to get. Now, Mr. Friedman was disbarred earlier this month and had been accused of failing to pay more than $5 million in taxes and faced 4 courts of criminal tax fraud and 1 of larceny. 4 counts. All B-level felonies. Each carries a maximum prison sentence of up to 25 years in prison. So those are some pretty serious charges. Now, of course, what did the investigators and prosecutors do? Well, hey, man, look, if you've got information on Cohen, who we are currently investigating, well, if you give us that information, then we will give you a plea deal. And apparently, this guy had enough information on Cohen or something relevant on Cohen to where prosecutors felt comfortable making that deal. Because they don't make a plea deal with just anybody, right? You have to actually have something that they want. Now, do you think this guy who evaded millions of dollars in taxes has any kind of moral center and won't give any good information on Cohen? No, of course not. Look, the result of this, of course, is there is going to be a lot of pressure on Michael Cohen now and could lead to even more to actual charges, right? Now, here's the thing, right? Mr. Friedman faced years and years, decades in prison. Under this plea agreement, he will avoid all prison time and receive 5 years of probation. Again, it makes you wonder what kind of information he had on Cohen. Look, as I said before, this is about getting to Michael Cohen and Michael Cohen getting to Donald Trump. Now, speaking of moral center, do you think Michael Cohen has moral center? No, he's been grifting alongside of Donald Trump for years. Again, Donald Trump's fixer. Now, do you think, faced with decades in prison, if there is anything significant that Michael Cohen had done, and look, I think he's in a lot of trouble. There has been no formal indictment, but he's already been raided. They're talking about bank fraud, wire fraud, and other potential financial crimes. Do you think that if there's an indictment, that Cohen won't flip on Trump? That Cohen will stay loyal? That he would take the proverbial bullet for Trump and spend years, possibly decades in prison for this guy? I don't think so at all. Look, let me give you a good example of why, right? Now, this is a guy who, and I'm speaking to Donald Trump here, came to Cohen's son's bar mitzvah and then embarrassed the hell out of him. When he was there, he actually told the crowd, he made the speech, I wasn't going to come, but Michael begged me. He begged me to come. He begged me to show up. That's embarrassing as hell. And look, there's probably many, many more instances of Donald Trump treating Cohen like shit. You think Cohen's going to be loyal? No. You're not. Look, if you're looking at years and decades in prison, then absolutely not. And so that's why they're trying to get to Cohen. Imagine the information that he actually knows. He's been by Trump's side for decades and decades. Been involved in maybe every single shady deal, right? And look, he almost certainly has a record of all those shady deals. And so if Cohen, as I said, flips on Trump, might have already flipped on Trump, we don't know. But boy, that corruption will definitely end up in the spotlight. Now, whether or not that's enough to convince Trump supporters, and both voters and politicians, to turn on Trump, well, that's another question. And that's one that we have to start asking. Will Trump voters stay in favor of fascism and corruption or not? We don't know. And I'm thinking that we might end up finding out the answer to that soon. Okay. So let's go from the Trumps to making fun of the Democrats. Okay. Now, yesterday, the Republicans, along with the help of Democrats, passed a bank reform package that will almost certainly lead to another financial disaster. According to Business Insider, the legislation known as the Crapo bill, after Mike Crapo, I know that's not how you say it, it's Mike Crapo, but I call him Crapo for obvious reasons, would increase the threshold for a bank to qualify as a systemically important financial institution, or sci-fi, right? Which, by the way, I enjoyed watching that channel. Anyway, serious story. So the banks, sci-fi banks, are subject to increased regulation under Dodd-Frank. Now, that includes the need to undergo the Federal Reserve stress test that modeled the bank's ability to weather financial and economic downturns without causing a threat to the larger economy. That's, of course, in response to the financial crisis, when all these different banks failed, and it basically caused a cascade chain reaction of different banks failing, which caused economic crash. Now, the Crapo bill, as I said before, would immediately increase the sci-fi threshold to banks that hold over $100 billion in assets from the current $50 billion level. It would raise that threshold to $250 billion after 18 months. So this is a pretty significant piece of legislation because it would help banks like SunTrust, BB&T, and Fifth Third. Now, in all, the number of institutions subject to the harsher rules would drop to 12 from 38. Now, here's the problem with that, right? So if you lower these, again, you raise that threshold, then you make it harder for us to watch banks like Countrywide. Now, Countrywide is essentially the face of the subprime mortgage crisis, right? They held about $210 billion in assets when they crashed. So that would have put them below the stress testing threshold. So they say, oh no, we're looking out for small and medium banks, right? Well, according to Mike Crapo and the rest of the bill, the people who support the bill, $210 billion is a small, medium-sized bank. But no, that kind of bank can cause massive damage to the economy if it crashes, if it fails. So this could end up leading to another mortgage banking crisis. Now, other changes include an exemption for banks with less than $10 billion in assets from the so-called Volcker Rule. Now, that's more of a consumer side, right? Consumer rule that helps regular people. Now, that prohibits depository institutions from engaging in proprietary trading and investing in certain hedge funds and private equity firms. So the whole point of that is to stop them from taking systemic risks with depositor money. Now, it would also force credit reporting agencies like Equifax and TransUnion to give consumers free credit freezes, but it also shields the agency from certain class action lawsuits and allow the firm to offer credit checks for mortgage applications. Now, there's also things in there where it allows for more discriminatory lending against African American and Latino borrowers, including allowing them to have higher interest rates than white peers for the same kinds of loans. So, yay, look at that. One good thing in there and then a whole bunch of terrible stuff. Now, of course, the claim is we're not defending the big banks, we're defending the small banks. I mean, look, we know the big banks are a problem, but these medium-sized banks are being crushed by regulation. Well, that turns out not to be true. The Intercept's David Dayen reported that members of Congress and bankers alike are only using this small community banks line as a fig leaf for the actual purpose of giving yet another handout to Wall Street behemoths like Citigroup. In fact, let me show you how these small community banks are actually faring under the current regulatory regime. In the third quarter of 2017, the FDIC reported that 96% of the nation's 5,294 community banks were profitable, up from just 70% in the depths of the crisis in 2009. 96% profitable, that's really, really good. Now, those banks, the profits for those banks are actually higher than ever. With greater loan growth than the big banks, community banks would argue that the consolidation and bank failures have weeded out those who cannot compete. However, those failures have been nearly non-existent, and consolidation is in line with normal historical patterns. So what all that means is that these small banks that are supposedly being crushed by these overbearing regulations are actually doing fantastic. They're doing really, really well. So then why then are we trying to deregulate them when they're actually doing fairly well? Well, it's because the big banks want to make more money. It's about profit. It's about being able to take more risk. Why, if they take more risk, they get more reward. And that's the whole thing. Now, here's a real reason why this passed. It's not to help community banks. It's because of the money. Now, let's go to our wall of shame here. For the Democrats, we know the Republicans love deregulating banks. It's not even worth pointing them out individually because they all support this bill. Here's the Democrats, though. Senator Michael Bennet received $1,909,757 from the banking industry. Senator Tom Carper got $170,810. Chris Coons, who voted for the bill, $373,599 from the industry. Joe Donnelly received $448,000 from the industry. Maggie Hassan, just over $420,000. Heidi Heitkamp, of course, $511,039. Doug Jones from Alabama, he received $417,406 from the industry, and of course voted in favor. All these Democrats voted in favor of deregulating the banks. Congratulations. All that work went into electing Doug Jones. And, of course, he votes for Republicans 50 to 60% of the time. Wow. Congratulations. Nice work resisting. I know. His opponent was a literal child molester. Still, you think we could do better. Anyway, as Democrats. Following Doug Jones, of course, is Tim Kaine. Tim Kaine received $921,903 from the industry and, of course, had voted in favor of this legislation. Angus King is an independent, but often votes with the Democrats, received $115,563. Joe Manchin of West Virginia, of course, $289,000. Claire McCaskill received $809,000. Bill Nelson, $281,000. Gary Peters, $648,000. Gene Shaheen, $319,000. Debbie Stabenow, $484,000. John Tester, $782,000. And Senator Mark Warner, who received $1,377,713 from the financial industry and had voted in favor of this piece of legislation, which is a piece of crap, or a piece of crap-o. So, I'm so glad we have Democrats out there that are looking out for the little guy. So glad to see. Resistance. Okay. One more. Fun little story. All right. Now, conservatives love to talk about paid protesters on the left creating movements funded by whatever George Soros or whatever shady left-wing billionaire you want to point out. The Parkland survivors are a great example. Oh, these people, they're just paid, right? Shooting never happened. They're just here to take our guns. They're an AstroTurf movement. They're being funded by Soros and all these left-wing groups. They're not real. Fake news, right? Now, I always thought that was pretty curious, right? Like, no, why would you call them fake actors, paid actors? That's insane. There's actually zero evidence that any of these movements are backed by big money, and that these protesters are just paid. They're fake, right? Now, we find out that there's a little bit of evidence that charge is nothing more than projection from Republicans, from conservatives. Well, what evidence do I have? Well, turns out that there was a company that had hired protesters in order to support a controversial power plant. Now, journalists at The Lens, a New Orleans news outlet, had investigated a group of orange shirt-wearing individuals who attended a city council meeting about a slated power plant project. Now, this group happened to be pro-power plant. Oh, we're in favor of the power plant. And we're going to come out as protesters and sit in these city council meetings in order to protest in favor of the plant and drown out anybody who is opposed to that plant. Now, according to the nonprofit website, many of the people who attended those meetings in support of the plant project by the Entergy Corporation were hired by the Los Angeles-based company Crowds on Demand. Oh, well, that's interesting. There's no ambiguity in that name. Crowds on Demand is exactly what it sounds like. Need a crowd? Well, you can hire them on demand. They'll come to your whatever protest or party, which would be really, really sad. Or your what was it? Ceremony where never mind. I was going to try to reference Donald Trump's inauguration. But anyway, I couldn't think of the word for some reason. But anyway, according to Michael Isaac Stein, who writes, based on interviews with actors and screenshots provided to the nonprofit outlet, that at least 4 of the people in orange shirts were indeed professional actors. One actor said he recognized 10 to 15 others who worked in the local film industry. They were paid $60 each time they wore the orange shirts to meetings in October and February. Some got $200 for a speaking role, which required them to deliver a pre-written speech. Keith Kiao, one of the people hired by Crowds on Demand for the Entergy meetings, told The Lens that he was paid every time someone said something against wind and solar power. So that shows you where they are on the ideological spectrum. Now, The Lens also acquired what it believes is Crowds on Demand's non-disclosure agreement for actors that repeatedly tells them to tell nobody that you're being paid. Well, that, of course, makes sense. If you're being paid as a protester, then it would make sense that you don't tell people, oh, no, don't worry about it, I'm being paid for this. Crazy. Now, along with The Lens's investigation, other New Orleans-based groups and individuals, including Michael Brown, an attorney for the city's Sierra Club chapter, decided to look into the background of some of these protesters holding signs in favor of this plant. Now, what's funny is that part of their tactic was to show up in such large numbers to where nobody else can get into those meetings. Nobody can get into those chambers because it's filled with people wearing orange shirts. Now, all these other outlets that looked into this came to the same conclusion. There was something a little fucked up about this. That seems a little odd that there's so many people now organizing in favor of a power plant and speaking out against wind and solar. Now, when asked about the actors, Entergy initially denied that they hired them and then blamed the Hawthorne Group, a public relations firm that it had hired. Oh, it was those guys. Oh, we hired the Hawthorne Group, and the Hawthorne Group decided to go and buy Crowds on Demand. I had no idea that that's what they were going to do. However, an internal document revealed that Hawthorne appeared to instruct Entergy to deny the allegations and called one paid demonstrator that went on the record, quote, delusional or lying. I love everything about this story. It's fantastic. From the paid power plant protesters, say that 5 times fast, to a corporation willing to hire a company called Crowds on Demand. Like, you don't think that people would find that out? I also think that that's great that there's a company that actually has that name. You know what they're about. You could hire them for your inauguration. Maybe Donald Trump actually did. Who knows, right? And just the fact that there's such an obvious AstroTurf job. Everybody looked into it and was like, yeah, no, we know what that's about. They were easily able to figure that out. And finally, I love the irony, right? The irony that these conservative groups, or look, even, for example, corporations like Entergy, right, that would go out of their way and likely claim if there were a left-wing protest, for example, for solar energy and against that specific power plant, oh, you're just paid protesters. You're being paid by George Soros and or any of these left-wing environmentalist groups to go and protest. Well, they're the ones that are hiring their own protesters. The energy companies are. Hilarious, right? Look, in reality, most right-wing protests, not all of them, of course, but a lot of them usually have some sort of billionaire behind the scenes that is backing them, or some think tank, or some foundation that is funded by shady billionaires. And they're usually behind the whole thing, pulling the strings. So it is kind of hilarious that they have that projection, and we find out, of course, that it is projection. So, hilarious. Okay. Republicans, man. Okay. That's all I got for you guys today. So, we're not going to go crazy over today, which is good. All right. So, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you for tuning in. Please make sure to like and share. I do have a super chat that I want to read real quick here from E. Joseph Peltier. Hopefully I said your name right, man. I've never said it like out loud. He says, and he's of course from North Dakota, worked on a campaign, a primary campaign against Heidi Heitkamp. He said, Heitkamp's pandering to the GOP is scaring the base from our party. The party wonders why we have a lack of participation or individual donations. But Democrats will say, but we need Heidi Heitkamp. We need them. Why do you need them when they vote mostly with Republicans? Doesn't make any sense to me. But that's what they say. So there's that. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you, Joseph. I appreciate that. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you, Peltier. Okay, good, Peltier. All right, so thank you. Appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll have a great show. So tune in then. That is 3 p.m. Eastern right here, Monday through Friday. So 3 to 4, or whenever we decide to get done. But anyway, so thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see you all tomorrow.